Hi there, this is Erica Merrill, and I am the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I'm very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She is an amazing family attorney, and she owns her own firm out in the Worcester area. We're very lucky that she comes with us on a regular basis to explain different parts of the law pertaining to family law. Today, we're going to be talking about jurisdiction. Welcome, Nicole, to the show. We are very excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So, jurisdiction. When I hear that word, I just think of all the crime shows where they're talking about jurisdiction. Is it the FBI? Is it the local PD? Yeah, what is this jurisdiction that we're talking about as it pertains to family law?
Jurisdiction is definitely one of those things that you have to know about. You personally probably don't, and the reality is you're going to be in the same jurisdiction throughout the entire case. But the reality is, where do we start? So jurisdiction matters for the attorneys, it matters for the court. Do you have the right to bring whatever lawsuit you have to that particular court? If you do not, then you're not going to be heard in that court. So long story short, it's where can I actually have a judge decide my case?
What types of jurisdiction are there?
There are basically two jurisdictions that every court must have. So you must have personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction is over the person. So the person that you are suing, the defendant, do you have personal jurisdiction over them? Are they in the state? Are they in your specific county? Are they somewhere else? So we need to know what that looks like and what kind of contacts they have. If they are in another state and you have jurisdiction here, do you have some minimum contacts, substantial minimal contacts with that person in the state of Massachusetts? Subject matter jurisdiction is going to be, do you have the subject? Is that relevant in this county? So perfect example is you get in a car accident in Middlesex County, you don't go to Worcester County. If you have a divorce and you want to get divorced and you're in Worcester or Worcester County, you're going to go to Worcester County Courthouse. So when you're talking divorce world or probate world, it's going to be your county specific courthouse for probate and family court. When you're talking civilly, there are a lot more courts. You know, we've got Denham, Needham, Reading, every place has a court, right? Every city pretty much has a court. So when you have that, where do you need to go? That's something you definitely want to know beforehand, so that you can get the right courthouse. There might be multiples that you can select, or there might only be one.
That's very interesting. I hadn't thought of any of that. And that just must be one of those things that lawyers know, but we lay people do not always know. So can you tell us, how is the jurisdiction determined?
It's going to be determined, again, based off of that subject matter jurisdiction and that personal jurisdiction. So where did the cause of action occur? If the cause of action in your divorce, it's going to be, where did you last live together? What county did you last live together? It's not going to be where you are now. So you could be in Middlesex and your ex could be in Plymouth. Which one's the court going to look at? Well, in that particular case, we're going to look at, where did they last live together? If it's Worcester, then we have to go to Worcester. So talk about a nuance, you're not going to necessarily know that. In other cases, again, if it's a car accident, for example, and the car accident happened in Boston, but the defendant lives in Agawam. Okay, now you might have two different jurisdictions. Do you have personal jurisdiction to do it in Agawam, or is it going to be in Boston? So that's something that we would have to look at, and we'd have to get more information. It's not something I'm going to be able to determine in a 5-second meeting with you, but I need to know more specifics about that. And you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I'm in Lawrence, so I want to sue in Lawrence. No, that's not how it works. We have to look at where that cause of action occurred. And again, in family world, it's really easy. The cause of action occurred usually where the child resides or where the parties reside and they're getting a divorce. In other types of areas, you've got to look at those other circumstances that again could take you throughout the entire state or even out of the state.
Wow, that is very interesting, because I know a couple who was married. Geez, where were they married? They were married in Tennessee, Army family, all over the place, split up while one was in Germany and one was in New Jersey. Now they're moving, one's moving down to Florida and one is living in New York. I mean, that is, how do they find the jurisdiction? That seems crazy. They just have to go back to the original place.
And that one is a little bit more tricky because we have to look at where was their home base. Just because they're in the military, they might have a home base that was somewhere else. It might be in Tennessee where they've never, changed their driver's license and they've never changed any of those things versus, hey, well, every time we move, we consider that state or that country our new home state. So that's a little bit of a blurry line that definitely I won't be able to answer right now, but we have to look at the circumstances. I'm going to have to sit down and go, okay, so when were you here and when was he here and where were the children? And there's a lot of digging there. The simple answer is I'd probably set up an appointment with you because I don't know off the top of my head, but I have other cases where clients call me up and they go, well, we got divorced in New York. Okay, well, where's one of the parties? Was the other party living in New York? Yeah. Okay, then we don't have jurisdiction here. Stop having a conversation with me. Well, I'm here now. Well, doesn't matter, again, where that defendant resides, where that cause of action occurred. So it's not necessarily where you are, it's where the other party is. And there's obviously variations to that, but that's the general synopsis of what you have to listen to for.
So how does it differ between the courts?
So again, if it's a probate court thing, it's always going to be county specific. If it is any other court, and I take that back, housing court is also going to be county specific. Those are the two. And then there's a whole different thing with Boston. So Boston is its own little breed. And they have their own rules and their own jurisdiction for a lot of things. So there's municipal Boston rules. But outside of the Boston area, you're going to look at, again, where that happened. We just had a case where my client was suing somebody, and the house, which was the subject of this case, was in Clinton. Well, nobody's really in Clinton anymore, so why do we have to sue there? Because that's the appropriate forum. So, when you have things and you go, well, sometimes you're able to get the next town over if you're doing district court. So district court is going to be, can I go to the next town over? Superior courts are only in counties. So again, you're going to go to that county in which it happened. So long story short, call an attorney to figure it out, because if you don't, there's going to be issues and you may be precluded from moving forward with it. But it's going to take a little digging from your attorney unless it's clear cut that everybody is in the same city. We need to do some digging and figure out where we can actually file that lawsuit.
Wow. Thank God people have you, because this is all very confusing. I mean, can you imagine trying to do this on your own and not being a family attorney? It sounds like a nightmare.
It absolutely is. And, I think one of the biggest things is people will say, well, we got divorced in Middlesex, but I'm in Plymouth now and he's in Essex. Where do I go? Well, Middlesex. And everyone's scratching their head going, but wait a minute, you just told me. Except in probate court, of course, there's another caveat that says, hey, we're going to keep it in the same county unless you tell us a really good reason. And it has to be a really good reason to change counties. Reason being is because once the file's there, it's going to stay there for the next, 18 years of these children's lives. And if we do get it changed, we have to physically bring the file from location to location, and then it has to go back to Middlesex. So nobody wants to do that. So unless there's extenuating circumstances, you're going to stay in that original county that you were first in.
So what happens if the jurisdiction is actually improper?
There could be grave consequences. I mean, obviously, the simple answer is you're going to lose your case. The case will be dismissed. So the question is whether or not either the court is going to reject the filing in its entirety because you don't meet the criteria to begin with, or two, one of the parties is going to file a motion for summary judgment or a motion to dismiss the case. And in those cases, again, you're going to have the judge ultimately make that determination. But if the judge determines that you don't have jurisdiction and the case is dismissed, then you have to start all over. And if you're doing something in the civil world, you're going to have real bad problems with it. If you're right at the statute of limitations, you file in the wrong court, the case is dismissed, you might be precluded for all time for going into the correct court and refiling. So, you don't have to worry about that in family law, but you do have to worry about that when you're dealing with civil cases that have a statute of limitations.
Wow. And we were just talking about this. What if a, a parent moves, a child moves to a new location? Does the jurisdiction change?
It depends. Again, if they move within the same state, the jurisdiction is not going to change. And that's even if both parties are no longer in that particular county. If one party is allowed to move out of the state with that child, then we're going to look at what type of case is it. If it's a contempt, it will still be heard in Massachusetts. If it's a child support case, then it's going to be where the where the payor is. So if the payor still lives in Massachusetts and the child and recipient is in Connecticut, then it's still going to be in Massachusetts. But if we're talking about parenting time in that same scenario, then parenting time is going to be addressed in Connecticut. So again, depends on what type of action you're looking to file. So modification would be in Connecticut. A contempt would be in Massachusetts, as would a child support increase or decrease would be in Massachusetts under those facts.
So moral of the story is if you're in Massachusetts, you need to hire Nicole. Because I mean, this isn't the first complicated thing we've talked about. We've talked about many complicated things. If you're not a lawyer, then you could really mess up your case. And as you mentioned earlier, it could just be thrown out if you file it in the wrong place. That can cost you time and money, depending on what the issue is that you're dealing with. So Nicole and her team are amazing at this. They do it every day. You've been doing it for, we don't want to age you, but it's been decades. And you're just really good at it. You have a great reputation. And so, yeah, I'd love to encourage that. Do you have any last words on jurisdiction? Any stories that you thought of as we were discussing this topic?
I think it's one of those things that people get very frustrated with it. I have a client that, again, is in Worcester County, was last lived together in Essex County, and the other party's in New York, and she's having a really hard time getting a divorce because the ex isn't participating. So you do have those cases. But I think the other part of that is, again, if you do file in the wrong county and somebody does file that motion for summary judgment or the motion to dismiss, chances are they're going to be asking for attorney's fees, which means, again, you might be liable for your ex's attorney's fees or the other party's attorney's fees because you did something wrong and you decided not to consult with an attorney or decided that you didn't care what they had to say. So there are consequences for doing it without knowing what the law is.
And we appreciate your time today and your information. And yeah, absolutely. Give the office of Nicole Reeves Lavallee a call out of Worcester if you have any questions about this or any other family matter. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much, Nicole, for your generous help in explaining all of these topics to us and sharing your stories and what to do and what not to do. We hope to see you again soon.